Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's been a real pleasure to listen to this so far. I just wanted to make one quick observation in that I've been tying together sort of the thread of various people's comments in a way, well, one thread in everyone's comments that really spoke to me in terms of, I know Lawrence made a comment about the kind of conflict between Arab and Jewish identity. Someone also alluded, I believe it was Shanta, to the conflict between Africa, like why is it that African Americans have to identify in that way? And there was talk about imperialisms and how they've shaped identities. And later on, someone mentioned that, you know, is from a Marxist perspective, perhaps, are all these identities just a manifestation of various oppressions? To what extent are these identities things that we consented to, that are rather than forces of history, often oppressive ones? I mean, I was having a conversation earlier today with the wife of a rabbi I knew quite well at university, on her the comment thread of one of her Facebook posts, which is probably where a disproportionate amount of my conversations take place these days. And she was saying, you know, why, you know, we were talking about the Black Lives Matter movement, and the conversation kind of ended up going to Ashkenazi, Mizrahi, Sephardi, Jewish identity, and to what extent there are white Jews, brown Jews, black Jews. And some people actually took real offense to the idea that they could be white and Jewish, because they said, if you look at the kind of the history almost of European civilization, it's been an attempt to exclude Judaism and Jewish identity from whiteness, if you like. We're painted as imposters. There's so many layers to this, but yeah, I mean, to what extent do we? And Summer actually preempted my point very nicely there when she asked, you know, people are free, are they not? And yeah, to what extent do we consent to these labels, and should we continue to identify them? I know it's quite a broad point, but it really resonated with me.
Hussam, do you wanna?
Yeah, all of these are very interesting points, definitely, and they are worth thinking about and reflecting on. But like given and like in view of the trajectory that we have set for the conversation, there are just very few number of points that I'd like to highlight. Definitely, when we speak of identity and identity politics, there are power relations involved, and there are power relations involved in the sense that there are certain sources, if I may put it this way, that aim to set a certain discourse, as a result of which certain identities are raised, or as a result they are constructed. So of course identities are fluid, and they can be manipulated, and they can be instrumentalized, they can be politicized. With that being said, and speaking in particular of the Middle East, definitely the scene seems to be very complicated because of the history of the Middle East, because of the importance of the Middle East, because of the strategic significance of the Middle East, because of the presence of the State of Israel in the Middle East. All of these are factors definitely that shape the importance and the significance of the Middle East. And this is why, like, from my exploration of the literature on the Middle East and the politics of identities in the Middle East, it is very obvious that now there is almost a consensus in the Western circles and especially in the Western academia, that now the Middle East has to move toward nation states again. And I can cite, for example, how clearly was the role of the State of Israel when it comes to the independence of in Iraq, the independence of which part, that which has Kirkuk.
I'm not sure. Maybe our Kurdish friends will know.
What do you mean? So I can help maybe.
He's asking about the independence of a particular part.
In Kurdistan,
in Kurdistan. So we could see how Israel, for example, was very keen to push forward the agenda that they have the right to be independent and to have their own nation state. So this brings about the idea that what role does the elite play in the Middle East? Do they have to keep silent about this and see this form of balkanization of the Middle East, or they have a role to play in this regard?
But just very quickly, Hussam, do you agree though that the elite that are dictating the identity politics in the Middle East are not just Western? There are also Arab elites that have geopolitical interests that are contributing to this dynamic.
And what I mean by the elites here, I mean the educated ones, the academics, the intellectuals. So do they really have a role to play, and how can this role be affected, and especially given, like I have mentioned earlier, the complexity of the scene in the Middle East? And also, I'd love to listen to your thoughts, whether or not you agree that this is how the region is pushed. It is pushed again towards nation states again, and every state has to have its own identity, its own interests, its own borders. It cannot interfere in any other countries' affairs. Tunisians have to have their own parliament and all their own special concerns, irrespective of the others. So I'd love to listen to all your thoughts about this.
Thank you, Hussam. So next we'll have, because we have 30 minutes left, so I want to make sure that everybody's opinions is heard and everybody spoke. So Zreba, I know, wanted to comment on identity. So Zreba, do you want to go ahead?
Yes. Greetings, good evening, and good morning, everyone, in your respective locations. I wanted to say, so my mother is actually a historian, and one of the things that she actually used to say about identity and politics is that we found throughout history that the strongest drivers of people are nationalism, politics, and then race. And typically what we've seen is that these drivers actually move people to start wars, to wage conflicts, start like relations with people, but they also allow opportunities for people to build and connect. And I think actually that's an interesting question, and I think from a philosophical place, like how do you identify? I actually currently live in America, and I am the product of both the East and the West. My mom is African-American Creole from the state of Louisiana, which has a long history of, if you go back to the inception of the United States, imported slaves from Africa and then colonized them for the use of building materials and buildings, and as the empire that we know that is America today. And then my father is a Libyan who originates in Tripoli. And so it was always in a kind of an interesting kind of experience actually growing up in a house with two cultures, literally.
Yeah. So yeah, I would like to have a comment about that. It can be identity choice. So I don't know if now I can't speak Arabic, so then I consider as Arab. So I think it's based in a philosophical, let's say, the understanding maybe, but actually something, let's say, God gave us. So our language, our, let's say, custom, our, the condition of the nationalism, I think something we received from the God, isn't it? Anyone to comment about?
I can answer you with a more difficult topic we haven't actually put on the table today. The question is, I don't know if we can choose an identity, but I know we can reject one. I can reject an identity I was given at birth, whether it's national, whether it's religious, whether it's sexual. And this is how we identify in the first place. I can reject being identified as a woman. God forbid, I love being a woman, but I think we can embrace our identities, we can reject them, and we can choose other identities. And this is, I think it's possible, because these are, for me, they're all made up there is a biological composition to humans, but in the end, time has proven, for me at least, that identity can be chosen, but you can also reject an identity that does not fit who you are, whether it's gender, whether it's religion, whether it's anything that you might think of. This is my opinion.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's very, you made very clear, and truly I agree. So yeah, sometimes for me, as let's say, if I what's the problem? I'm a court till now. I don't have, let's say, my freedom, my blah 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 in area located in between the, I'm sorry about that, Arab, Turk, and even the Persian, the Irani. So it's still question, but if I choose my identity, let's say, or even my gender and religious point, blah blah, if I really wanted to live life, I mean, fully, when there, I choose other one. So here really a point, but what I wanted to say, it can be choice, but it's really hard to
Do you not think?
how
I mean,
deny my let's say identity as a court. So if it's gonna be hard, really.
Well, we're both freedom fighters, so I understand where you're coming from. It's really difficult when you have to fight for basic stuff in your life as well. So I totally understand.
Yeah,
and I think that highlights the fact that we are free, and rightfully it's our right to choose how we identify, but sometimes that choice is a privilege.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Well, a nice one. That's a very nice point. Lawrence, you had a question.
Yes, thanks. Actually, Shata just mentioned something I was going to say. I think about, no, you said it more succinctly, apropos what Layla said, which is, ideally we should have a choice. We could apply, fluid identities. But I also think we make that choices as individuals. And then there's the family, the extended family, the hamullah, the religion, and everybody else is looking at you. So if I were to become Catholic or Muslim or something, what would my mum say? And everyone, we all know that situation.